Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Venacera, and Arun.
Hello and welcome to episode 140 of the Warships Podcast. I am your host, Kellorn, and Vanessa and Arun welcomed Lord Zath back to the show one more time. Zath, it's good to have you back.
Thanks, but don't get too used to it. School starts up in a couple weeks, sadly.
These things happen. Well, this week we wanted to talk about a kind of a touchy subject, which is ship balancing. And that's actually why we had you back on the show today, Zath, is that you guys actually had some kind of exercise at the CC Summit about ship balancing, and you actually got to balance a ship together, correct?
Yes, although it wasn't so much the balancing part of it. I think it was more just the conceptual design that they were the most interested in. They wanted to see where we would take a ship, and of course, balance was a part of it, but they kind of wanted to see what our overall concept was.
So can you take us through it from the start and talk about, what was the exercise that they ran you through? And then specifically, when we want to talk about, how are we going to balance ships and why does Wargaming make some of the decisions that they make when they're balancing ships?
Yeah, so this came to us as a little bit of a fun activity right before lunch on the first day of our summit. So we're basically given two pieces of paper. We're divided off into four different areas, each with its own whiteboard. We're given these two pieces of paper. On one piece of paper are the base stats of a ship, and it turns out it's the Tier 10 Italian destroyer Paolo Emilio. And then the other page is like a list of rules and guidelines. So what things we could change and what things we could not change. And their task for us was to design a ship that would be unique, fun to play, but still balanced within the realm of the game.
So can you give us an idea of what the stats were like on the starting sheet and then kind of what changes that you guys decided to make?
Yeah, sure. So, if you don't mind me mentioning, Raptor Stream video kind of goes through this too. But the idea was that there was a 4x2 135 millimeter gun. It had 8.5 second reload, 12.8 kilometer range, 24,700 hit points. It came loaded with HE shells and AP shells that were already somewhat tuned. The torpedoes were 3x4, 533 millimeter with 71 second reload. The traditional 12 kilometer range that we see with other Italian ships. Pretty decent alpha damage of almost 13,500. And just over 50 knot speed. So they're pretty slow torpedoes, kind of like the old sea mine thing with the Sims. 43.5 knot maximum speed, 810 turning circle with 5.3 rudder shift. So basically standard destroyer tier 10. And then base detection was 9.8 kilometer surface, which seemed a little bit high, but we kind of figured, that's where we're starting with.
Gotcha. So what did that concealment reel go to when you were, fully modded with the upgrade and with the captain skill?
So this is where the fun came into play, and you didn't see too much of that with in the video here, but we were given about an hour to figure this stuff out. And so we first looked at things from the overall, like, what do we want this ship to do? How do we want it to perform? What kind of consumables do we want to have on it? That sort of thing. And then we went just bonkers with math. And we were literally sitting there with our calculators trying to figure out, okay, what would the concealment be with captain, all that kind of stuff. And it came out to, I think, 6.6 once everything was reduced to the concealment module. And I'm trying to do the math in my head right now, but I think it was 6.6. So we were trying to figure out, like, where is that with the other destroyer? So we listed out, we actually consulted the wiki and figured out what all the other concealments would be. And, where does this ship lie with everything else?
Gotcha. So where did you guys elect to make changes? And where, I guess, first of all, did you guys consider the ship in its initial form to be balanced? And if not, what did you guys see as issues?
We looked at the ship in its initial form. We thought, okay, it seems like it's fine as it is. The bigger thing was it felt kind of boring. It felt like there wasn't anything really that spectacular or special. It had Italian 12-kilometer torpedoes. Okay, we've seen that in the cruisers. It's got its guns. Okay, it looks whatever, but it felt like a shell, and we kind of looked at that and said, we need to spice this up. We need to make it something that's special and unique, but we don't want to do it in such a way that, of course, it completely turns the game on end in terms of balance, right? So, we started coming up with some different ideas for it. We thought, I think Raptor brought this up. He said, the Italian destroyers were designed basically to counter the French destroyers. So with the French destroyers hot on our minds after testing them and playing them, we were thinking, okay, how can we counter that destroyer and essentially neutralize it? So we started thinking about different ideas. One of the ideas we had was some sort of a smoke that would prevent, that would enable the ship to turn away. So imagine yourself in a situation, you're heading straight for a French destroyer. That destroyer is coming straight at you with engine boost. Let's say you've got your engine boost on too. You want to be able to turn away and run, but not in such a way that you take a ton of damage, because the French destroyer, of course, is going to pop their main battery reload booster, and before you know it, you've lost half or more of your health. So we wanted to find a way to give the Italian destroyer a more of a defensive advantage in that situation. So we thought about some sort of smoke, and if you've been following the Italian cruiser, there's the talk about the fuel oil smoke, which we had no idea about at this meeting, but we basically came up with the same concept. Can we have a smoke on the ship that allows you to run away at full speed and stay concealed? So we came up with this idea of like one just massive puff that would cover the entire turn radius of the ship. So if I'm at full speed, I go into hard rudder, I make inky, and all of a sudden nobody can see me for 10 seconds. Just enough time for me to turn around and run, and enough time for the French destroyer to waste their main battery reload booster. So that was kind of the crux of our entire design.
Interesting. Vanessa, Arun, is that something that you guys would have considered when you were if presented with similar circumstances?
Honestly, no. I don't think I would have come up with that one. I would be really hard pressed to try and think of brand new ideas to introduce to the game, and something that would be of that magnitude.
The main concept, I think, actually has been kicking around the Warships community for a while, though. Like the idea of a smoke word that would allow you to disengage. But that exact one, probably not. I actually disagree with Vanessa here, though. I think it's not that difficult to come up with new stuff. It's difficult to come up with new stuff that's balanced and actually makes sense from a gameplay perspective. It's easy to come up with stuff that is unrealistic. Main battery reload booster.
So Vanessa, we're thinking about the stats that Zath said at the beginning. What would your first inclination have been to go with for balance?
Well, I definitely like the concept of having a anti-French destroyer, but I mean, the French destroyers are so crappy that it wouldn't take much to anti-DD them, especially when they're not even really a DD. I don't know. I would really have to give that one some serious thought. I mean, I like the initial, the long sea mines. I actually like that. With the other, ships in the Italian line, I've kind of liked the idea of spamming a bunch of sea mines out there and throwing them out there and having something different with that. You just kind of put them there, and oftentimes people just kind of run into them. And there's with the ideas of, how are the weapons going to be? How are the shells going to be? And how are they going to be effective and different from the other nations? It'd be, what kind of rate of fire, what kind of, dispersion, and how effective will the shells actually be when hitting? Would they introduce something like an SAP? I mean, obviously we know that now with the cruisers, but at the time when they were making this, I don't know, had they mentioned that to you, Zath, or was that still all new as well?
No, that was completely new. We had heard about SAP as a new ammo type, but we had no idea how it would work. And so we actually completely ditched the idea of HE and AP shells. And we said, let's just come up with our vision of what SAP would mean. So these are 135 millimeter guns. And we thought to ourselves, well, this might be a good opportunity to build a destroyer that could actually damage cruisers. And so we said, okay, so what would happen if we had given these 135 millimeter shells, SAP, and we said, okay, well, what does SAP mean? And we said, let's just do HE, but with 1/5 penetration instead of 1/6, and I think no fire chance or something along that line. And so when you do 135 and you divide that by 5, you get 27 millimeters of pen, which basically allows it to penetrate, Des Moines, pretty much any other cruiser, I believe, other than like the Russians. So now you got a ship that I don't know that it would go toe to toe necessarily with the cruiser, but it could at least hit back as well. And that was one of the interesting things about our concept here. To get to your comment about the balancing out, the rate of fire, the amount of damage, we looked at that and we said, look, we'll let Wargaming figure that out. Okay, we'll allow them to tweak things however they want, because we had just gone through, if I remember it, we had just gone through the discussion on ship balancing and how it works. And I have to think about that for a second. But we wanted to say let's look at the concept behind this and then go from that. No, we had not yet gone through balance yet. Okay, sorry. It's hard to keep straight in my mind what happened like 3.5 weeks ago, but we did come up with some basic stats for the shell, and we basically said, go ahead and tweak as you need.
So what was the final iteration of that ship from you guys? What were can you list all the changes that you made to that ship? And that's what you said, okay, we think this ship is balanced.
Yeah, I need to think about that for a second here. I'm just looking at a picture I had taken of our board. But we had basically said we're going to leave. I think we decided to leave the base detection as it was at 8.6, and we gave it the different shells. So obviously that's going to be a little bit different. The radius was the same. I think the rudder shift, we decreased it slightly compared to base. So let's see, what did we have for base rudder shift? To 5.3 second base. And we came up with, okay, we left it at 5.3. We mathed it out and said it'd be about 4.2 with the rudder shift module. We didn't touch the anti-aircraft at all. We didn't really care too much about that in this situation here. And I think the reload, we set it to 6.5 seconds. So slightly buffed reload. We wanted to say, okay, we didn't want to make this a ship that would do a ton of damage and would completely destroy everything. And that's why we had thought that the smoke idea was more of a defensive tool more than an offensive tool. And that was kind of important to us. We also wanted to make sure that it couldn't penetrate battleships, which is why with that 1/5 pen rule, you get 27 millimeter. So it won't even pen the 32 millimeter ships. And we also said that we would not allow IFHE to have any impact on this gun. So you can't improve the penetration any better than the 27. We said we're going to keep the torpedoes slow. I think we increased the flood chance just a little bit to 310%. For comparison, the French torpedoes have 311% flood chance. So we wanted to make it in line with that. But I don't think that we made too many other balancing decisions besides what I just explained.
Gotcha. And so you said that the presentation on ship balancing from a wargaming perspective was later in the day. Could you tell us what they said in their video, just kind of the high points, and then if that would have impacted the decisions that you guys made when you balanced the ship originally?
Yeah, so when they talked about ship balancing, and I think we discussed that briefly the last time I was on with you guys, but one of the things that they look at is how is the ship when it's testing on live test, how is it performing compared to its contemporaries? So the other tier 10 destroyers and the like. They also take into account feedback. So as you guys can attest, when we give feedback to ships, some of the key questions that they ask are things like, well, what is this ship good against? So who can, is this ship really good against killing cruisers or battleships or what have you? And then also, what ship is the best counter for this ship? And so, when you're thinking about that, then they take that data as well to try to figure out what exactly is their goal for the ship, because they also, of course, have a vision, and is that kind of working according to what they want to see? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so would any of the stuff that they said had impacted on how you guys balanced, or do you feel like yours was kind of an initial balancing pass before it went to live test, and that you would learn more from the live test?
That's exactly what we would probably say. Interestingly enough, in that balance discussion, one of the things that we realized when I first started as a super tester, what is that, 2 years ago now? What we used to do is we used to test the ships out. We'd have focus tests where we would get together and test out, say, British cruisers or something, and we would try to get an idea of how they would work. But you have to understand, when we're in a small scenario like that, we're all together, we really don't care what the results are, right? We're just kind of playing to dick around and have fun. So the results aren't going to be accurate. They tried doing testing of ships on public test for a while, but they found the same thing, right? When I'm playing public test, I'm not like super tryharding, right? I'm just playing to play. So I think what Wargaming's chosen to do now is switch more to a live test environment for most of their ships. And that's part of the reason why we get these ships almost like a day or two after the patch releases. Now we get them, and then we have them for the most part for the entirety of the patch. So when I was in St. Petersburg, I was talking with Winston Smith, the head of Super Test, for a while about all this. And one of the interesting gems that he shared with me was that, when we get these ships and we're playing, Wargaming is instantly looking at these stats. So like the first day, yesterday, right, when we had the ships and stuff, Wargaming is already taking a look at the stats and saying, okay, how are things going with the ship compared? And then they'll wait a week. How does it look now? Because of course, every ship, there's a bit of a learning curve, right? So how does the ship look now compared to a week ago? Around the 2-week mark, so halfway through the patch cycle, that's when they have their first decision about how things are working. Do they want to keep this up, or are they happy with how things work? If they're happy with how things work, they pull the ship from us and they say, no need to test it anymore. Ready to go. We have enough data and we're happy with where it sits. If there's significant problems with the ship, that's when you'll see on the dev blog, they'll announce changes to a ship, and then they'll typically tweak that ship, and then there it is, halfway through the patch, updated stats. Maybe they change turret traverse, maybe they change reload, whatever, and then they follow that again. And if they're still not satisfied after that full patch cycle, well, if it's a premium ship, then they'll redo the cycle again. If it's a tech tree ship, it's a little bit tougher because, of course, they've got deadlines when they want to release ships by and that sort of thing. I just want to mention, you notice how with right now the French destroyers, we get preview access to those French destroyers, right?
Yeah.
So like you can get like you can get the Jaguar out of the crate, or Guépard or whatever, the tier 6 all the way up to the tier 9. Well, if you think about it as a player, this is great, right? I get a preview of the ship. Well, what do you think Wargaming's doing while you're playing the ship? So they're checking balance of that ship. They're looking at it and saying, how is the standard player that's now getting this tier 5 destroyer, how are they doing? And then they're comparing those stats as well. So it's a really neat opportunity for them to almost extend the test purpose for a tech tree line compared to what they've done in the past. You might recall way back when with the German destroyers, we were testing them and contributors were playing them, and everybody was saying, oh, these ships are great, right? The way they are. And then the next day they get released, and all of a sudden things have changed, especially at the high tier, and all of a sudden they're not as fun anymore, and they're nowhere near what everybody thought. So it's a huge shift from where we started.
So one of the big complaints that I hear sometimes is, especially when I'm playing the test ships, is why are these test ships here? I don't want to play against them. They're ruining my stats. This is the live server. We shouldn't have test ships. And, you went through your explanation of why, testing these ships on the super test server or the public test server has its issues. But how do you think that the impact of these test ships on the game as a whole is something that we should be concerned about or not?
When it comes to the game as a whole, I would say where would you put these test ships to give them an environment that allows Wargaming to get stats and make tweaks necessary for the good of the game? If you're not going to put them out in random battles, do you put them in co-op? If you do that, then you're just fighting as boss. That's not going to give Wargaming enough data. You sure as heck don't want to put them in clan battles or ranked battles. As a matter of fact, I still recall the days when a certain super test coordinator took the Scharnhorst out into ranked battles when we first got the Scharnhorst. And within, I think, the third battle that he had taken the Scharnhorst in, there was already a complaint post on the forum. And within a couple hours, there was a commandment, thou shalt not take test ships in ranked. So yes, players can easily make the argument, this is ruining my game. It's not fair. It's not fun. I don't like the fact that I've got a test ship on my team or I'm up against a test ship. But at the same time, this needs to happen in a standard environment, and random battles is about as standard of an environment as it can be. If we don't do this kind of play testing, what do you get? You get ships like the Imperator Nikolai, which, Wargaming's basically said, never again will we release something like that. And even to a certain extent, the Belfast, I mean, that ship was live tested, but that was back when live testing was only a week or two before they released the ship. And that doesn't give you enough data.
Arun, did you have something to throw in?
Well, as an aside, I once took a test trip into ranked, but I asked for permission first, and that was before we were told that we weren't, allowed to do it. And they said yes. And I was like, really? They said yes. So I tried one game, but it felt kind of dirty, even though the ship wasn't that great. I don't remember what it was, though.
Vanessa, how do you feel about the testing of ships on the live server? Is that something that concerns you, or is it just something you think that needs to be done?
No, that is the way to do it. And the way Zath explained everything is, kind of been my stance is, this is the only environment where you can truly get good data for these ships that are tested. And you do not want, these ships coming out in a broken or unplayable state. I mean, I know that's why we put in so many games testing these ships, so we give as much data as possible to Wargaming, and they can see it and they can make the changes needed. So we don't have another Imperator Nikolai. I mean, it's just the way the game was back then and, the way it is now, as far as how these ships are getting tested. And, you can see that, these ships are coming out, they're at least playable. And though we might like them, we might dislike them, they at least feel pretty balanced for the most part. And it's completely different than, when Imperator Nikolai came out. And it just, some ships were so broken, some ships were unplayable, and that they sucked so much. And you're only going to get good data so that they can sit there and actually balance these ships through testing on the live server.
Yeah, what's funny was we had a Q&A period after the balancing discussion, and I don't remember who, it might have been Flambass, asked the question, well, how did we get ships like Belfast then? After this whole talk about stats and looking at data and all that, and we're saying, you're telling me that the Belfast was tested and all the data obtained and Wargaming was happy with it and says it's balanced and all that? Come on, BS. And the answer was a very simple one. That was before Sir Nelson's time. That was before he ran the whole balance department. So, we often as players forget that this game is a live game that is ever evolving, and it has been doing so for the past 5 years. So, keep that in mind as you're thinking about how we're doing things now compared to back then.
I will ask, did they mention anything about, just kind of the testing factor of the ships where, oftentimes you get focused and because it is the test boats, the new shiny ship?
That was kind of brought up a little bit. And of course, Wargaming can't completely factor that out, right? Even for a while, as testers, we were told you can't go in a division with friends in a test ship. And then it was changed to, well, you can be with a division with friends, but you can't be in a division with the same ship. I remember once taking 3 Arizonas out, like a triple Arizona division. That was fun, but also really dirty. But then Wargaming started realizing, hey, wait a minute, players are going to do this, right? Players are going to buy the ship. They're going to get their friends to buy the ship. They're going to say, hey, let's all go and play the same ship together. And they're going to do these kinds of things. And so, sometimes we need that data too. As far as everybody focusing, yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. You and I, we all kind of have that happen right now. And it's kind of fun to see how players react to you. Because sometimes I've been insta-focused as soon as I'm spotted, right? And then there's other times where like they see me and everybody just runs away from me. Like they don't even want to take any risks. So it's kind of funny how things work on both sides. One other thing I want to mention, and I thought about this back when I did an interview podcast with Stuntman. We were talking about Stalingrad, and of course, back then I'm under super test NDA. I can't talk about my experience in the Stalingrad, that sort of thing. And so I changed the discussion, and it was an interesting discussion. Whether or not you believe the Stalingrad's OP, how do you counter it? How do you get past it? Because every ship's got to have some sort of weakness. And we know the Stalingrad, for example, it's the side armor, right? You get on the flank and boom, it disappears. So, I think for players, when they see these test ships, what players should be doing too is, and I see this happening often anyways, is that they're evaluating the ship for themselves mentally. How is the ship doing? I was in one of the French destroyers, and I was up against a cruiser, a Russian, I think it was a Budyonny, and I hit the brakes with speed boost on and reversed, and he completely miscalculated my speed for the torpedoes. So my torpedoes hit him, his torpedoes missed me, and he said, wow, that thing stops on a dime. So while, yes, it sucks that he doesn't know that ahead of time, now he's going to know that. He's going to be thinking about that, and he's learning how to deal with these ships in a totally different way. So yes, players have to deal with it in game, but I think we give them some good feedback as well, or some good data that they can use.
Alrighty. Well, we do have 3 new test ships to talk about this week. And first up is Ohio, the Tier 10 premium USN battleship. With 8 457mm guns, she is to Georgia what Montana is to Iowa. In her current state, she does not have the speed boost of Georgia, but does appear to have the improved secondaries. I feel like the final iteration of Georgia, the dispersion was such that the ship was playable and fun, and I liked it. But Ohio, the horizontal dispersion in particular, is often terrible and very inconsistent. Well, I kind of fell in love with the plucky Tier 9. I'm having a really hard time with Iowa so far. So have you guys been experiencing similar things with Ohio so far?
Yeah, I don't really like the Iowa right now either. I do like the Ohio, though. The Ohio is amazing. But Iowa, not so much.
Sorry, I'm getting these stuck in my head, so.
That's okay. So I actually like the Ohio, surprisingly. The guns, or the firepower, felt good enough, and the secondaries are basically the same, at least as far as I could tell, which is okay. It's nothing amazing, but it's good enough, I think. And I found that the guns just dealt the damage. The magic was in the survivability because of her insane heal. Her heal has a 40-second cooldown compared to the normal 80-second one, and it heals like 730 HP per second compared to 480 on the Montana. So the Montana and Ohio are basically the same hull. They have the same HP. The armor is, at least as far as I could tell, the same. So that's a pretty big heal difference, I would say. And that plus the guns meant that I could go close most of the time and fight, and then the damage was fine.
Yeah, I wish I had greater success in the ship. I felt that, the final iterations of Georgia, I was doing a lot better. With this one, I agree. The guns, are kind of all over the place. And initially, I kind of went the same, route. I just kind of duplicated Georgia. And I ended up having to put the plotter, the accuracy, because it's like the shells just felt like they were going all over the place. And I was not happy at all with the dispersion. So, I changed it up a little bit, had some decent games, but nowhere near, some of the games that I had in Georgia. And I almost kind of felt like, I wonder if that was a little bit of, some of those games you would get top tier and you'd go face off against some 7s where you would just go to town. And then, at tier 10, you're going to be fighting against a lot of other tier 10s. And I just kind of feel that maybe the difference in what you're seeing and facing off against, maybe it skewed that a bit, at least for me.
Zath, did we talk about Georgia the last time you were on the show?
I can't remember, to be honest. Maybe.
I can't either. So I guess, can you give us your thoughts on Ohio? And, did you like Georgia in the first place? And are you liking Ohio so far?
So Georgia for me was a love-hate relationship. It took a while for me to get used to the guns. A ship like that makes you want to spec into secondaries, even though most would claim it's quote unquote inefficient. And the biggest problem, in my opinion, with Georgia is that she really struggles when there's an awful lot of opponents nearby. And so in a 12v12 full random battle, if you overextend and somebody's at your 90-degree flank angle, then you're screwed. I haven't so far. I've only played 2 games in the Ohio, but I haven't really felt the same way in the Ohio. So maybe it has to do with the Montana hull armor scheme versus the Iowas. There's that. I've had Yamato shooting at me, and I looked at that and thinking, okay, here comes the lull pen. It didn't happen, so who knows? She felt pretty good. I really wish that the speed boost was there, the engine boost consumable, because that really helps with the Georgia, especially with dodging torpedoes from destroyers that start chasing you. Because at tier 10, those destroyers can get torpedoes, to hit you outside of your secondary range, and they can just kind of sit there and pop at you at 6 kilometers away with 12-kilometer torps. So it's really hard to get out of those kinds of situations if a destroyer doesn't want to let himself get spotted. So it's fun, more fun than I thought I would have compared to the Georgia. And I'm waiting to see how things continue with her.
I'd also like to mention that I'm pretty sure she's actually slower than even the Montana. So yeah, I don't think we're going to get a speed boost. Or perhaps we will to make up for it, but I really wouldn't hold my breath for it. The heal on the ship feels insane.
Yeah, and I wonder, is that the same heal that's on the Georgia? I don't have the client open. I should probably do that and check, but I'm curious about that.
I don't think so. I think Georgia has a standard heal. Alrighty, well, the next test ship is one with a bit of a history. As a joke, LittleWhiteMouse convinced Sub-Octavian that she should write a joke review for her 100th ship review. This was a bit over a year ago, and thus Thunderer was born. Sub-Octavian provided some doctored screenshots, and away the legend went. Now that April Fools, which is a kind of a joke because LittleWhiteMouse's name is April, is over, the Thunderer is actually back, this time for real. Similarly to Ohio, she has 8 457mm main guns, but has all the other quirks of the Royal Navy battleships. Trolley armor, 5 super heals, which is ridiculous when you have a superintendent and
I don't think they're super heals.
Consumables. They're pretty close. And then they're maybe not super heals, but they're really good. And then she has defensive fire, something that's a little bit like HMS Hood. The guns have a lot of the same issues that Ohio has, with wonky horizontal dispersion and relatively low velocity, making the arcs pretty high. I also suspect that they have the Royal Navy AP fuse timers as well, because I had a hard time penetrating Yamato armor broadside at 11 kilometers. That said, this ship has a lot of staying power with her heals, and I actually had more fun playing Thunderer than I did playing Ohio.
You forgot to mention it makes the planes go away.
I actually never got into a plane match with her, so I couldn't actually test the defensive fire. I was like, oh, I'm trying to get in. Nope. Try it. Nope. Nope.
Well, you're not sure, but I have the game open, so unless the UI is saying the wrong thing,
Okay.
though, the heal is over twice as weak as the Conqueror's. So that actually is a pretty big difference. Feels like a standard heal to me, or at least the numbers say it.
Fair enough. It just felt really good, so I guess maybe it's not a super heal, though.
I'd also like to mention that her rudder shift is the same as a legendary Conqueror, which gets down to 8.3 second rudder shift time. So yeah, you're dealing with a big-ass battleship that has better rudder shift than quite many cruisers on the Thunderer, and I thought it was quite fun to play. I also never got into a match with the CV, so I don't know how the anti-air works, but the guns actually felt okay-ish to me. Like, the few games I played, I could still deal damage.
Oh no, I definitely did damage, but the guns felt okay, particularly against cruisers. The problem was I had that Yamato at 11 kilometers broadside, and I was like, oh, I want to Citadel him, and I literally just bounced off.
That's what you get for not firing HE.
That is a question though, Arun. Did you fire HE or did you fire AP? Because I almost exclusively fired AP out of these guns.
The one game where I did like 260k damage, I fired mostly HE actually. But I did fire AP somewhat, but that might have been mostly on cruisers.
Zath, have you gotten a chance to try Thunderer yet?
I did, and I took screenshots of the things that I did to cruisers. I did some bad stuff to broadside Des Moines, and I think it was a Hindenburg as well that I citadeled at medium range, probably about 12 kilometers away. I was in a carrier battle. It was unfortunately tier 8 carriers, and it was the Graf Zeppelin. So you have to take that into account, but yes, I definitely melted away aircraft. At one point, the Zeppelin decided to come at me with a full squadron of torpedo bombers and didn't even survive to make the attack. So that was kind of neat. But, the thing about Thunder is just like the Conqueror, most of the anti-air is in mid-range. And so you're kind of forced, if you want, to make sure that the planes stay away from you, you have to run for your upgrade in the first slot, your auxiliary armaments modification 1, so that they have 100% survivability for secondaries and for anti-air mounts. And even with that, I found at the end of that particular battle, I was down to say 75% health on my anti-air at the mid-range. My long range was still 100% healthy, and my short range was cleared around to about 50%, 60%, something like that.
Vanessa, how about you in the Thunderer meme boat?
Oh, it's definitely a meme boat. There was quite a few matches where all I could think of was LittleWhiteMouse and all the charts that she did, and just the meme of a ship that that we're actually sailing. It is really funny. I got into quite a few matches with carriers, and I didn't even really buff the AA, and it's like it made the planes go away. So it was, I'm sure there's battleship players out there that really hate carriers right now, and will probably be salivating over Thunderer, because if it's released, with that AA defensive fire and as is, they're going to be really happy.
I was actually thinking to myself, I don't know that AA defensive fire is going to make it all the way through testing. I don't know. It just seems like it's not extraneous, but it doesn't seem like it fits. Did you guys feel the same way or no?
Well, I guess, yeah, kind of. To be honest, I don't think that she needs the anti-air. I don't know if she needs the defensive fire. I mean, if you're smart about sector reinforcement, it kind of works. It's not as effective, but it still gets the job done. I actually buffed the anti-air. Not that I'm looking at it in my game here. I actually put AA Mod 1 on instead of the aiming system to get that extra 2 puffs of flak burst or whatever, which mid-range it doesn't need it because it starts with 14, but long range it's only got 4. So I figured, hey, that's what, a 50% increase in flak puffs. That's pretty nice. And I didn't feel like my main gun suffered that much for that trade. But getting back to your question, what would you put in its place, or would you just remove defensive fire altogether?
I think I'd probably just remove it. I think Thunder is actually in a pretty decent spot. I don't think she needs it.
I will say this though, I didn't notice the AA like really panicking or changing up any of the spreads or anything. It just boosted the AA. At least from my observations. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff going on. Maybe I didn't really pay attention, but
alrighty. Well, we have the last ship of the bunch to test is actually Hayate, which appears to be a tier 10 premium version of Yugamo with similar guns but with a better reload, 12-kilometer torps that have a longer reload than Yugamo, and a 6.1 kilometer concealment. She also gets the option of choosing smoke generator or torpedo reload booster. I confess that I honestly do not understand this ship or why she's a tier 10 premium. So did any of you guys have an idea of what this ship is supposed to be and why it's going to be put in the game?
I kind of felt that it's more like Summers. Like that's kind of what I've felt that the ship is kind of like. I played it very similar to how I recently tested Summers, and I feel really comfortable with the ship. I wish, the 6.1 is not always easy to work with, but it's doable. I mean, I played the German destroyers for so long, and it's just a comfortable, well-rounded ship.
So how did you set it up, and how do you mean you played it like Summers, Vanessa?
So I did it, as a gunboat and as a torpedo boat. And, I took smoke and I took the torpedo reload, not the torpedo reload booster, but the module, the last slot module, torpedo mod 3, I think. And, set it up. If I got in this position where I could use the guns, it definitely used the guns. It's got great reload rate on it. It's got a great arc trajectory, and the guns do very well damage wise. So I very much use the guns, and I very much use the torpedoes, and I did the normal DD things with this ship, and I felt very much like Summers, where I could use the guns and the torpedoes, and regardless of the situation that I was in, I had an answer for something, and I at least felt like I could contribute to it.
I played Hayate a bit. I didn't find her to be particularly nice, but I played with Streps yesterday a lot, and he played Hayate most of the games, something like 15 games or something, and his opinion on the ship was something along the lines of, it's Yugamo, but worse, at a higher tier for some reason. And the main complaint he had was the terrible torpedo reload, because of it's the quint torpedoes, right? Which means that the torpedo reload is longer. And the result of it is that you just can't use the torpedoes as you would like to use them. And because of that, Yugamo just feels better, I suppose. I'm not quite sure if I would say Yugamo is straight up better, because the gun firepower on the Hayate is pretty amazing, but the torpedoes definitely feel very lacking. You pretty much have to go like a torpedo build to really even have a chance of using them all that much.
Now, Zath, you said that you played Hayate a little differently. Can you explain how you set the ship up and why?
Well, I took a look at it, and to me, I noticed that the artillery, the reload is pretty darn good. They're 127s, not 100s, but I still ended up throwing my Akizuki captain on. And so I played it more as a gunboat, using the torpedoes if needed, but I found it pretty effective at bullying some of the bigger ships away. I never felt like I was at a disadvantage against most other destroyers. And with IFHE, I've got that 27 millimeter pen. So kind of going back to what I was talking about with that Italian destroyer, I can take on cruisers, and I actually did gun down a Buffalo with the help of others, and that was pretty fun. But the interesting thing I noticed about the ship is the anti-air. She's got a 100% probability for hit, which is obviously more than most other ships. And one of the things that I did was I buffed her AA guns mod 1 again, so I could give her more flak bursts, because she starts with a default of 3. So moving up to a 5 for mid and 5 for long, that's a pretty significant increase in flak bursts. So one of the things I haven't had a chance to play with yet because I didn't get a carrier to focus me like I was hoping, but I think this ship is one of those ships that almost, the Haragumo wishes it could be in terms of anti-air, if that makes any sense. I like the arcs of the shells. They're felt a lot less floaty than the Akizuki line, so that's nice. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the game I played in her. I'm looking forward to playing some more. I don't know that I'm gonna drop the smoke for torpedo reload booster. I think the torpedo reload booster is just too nice of a benefit, or sorry, too much of a drawback, because then you can't hide away from the carriers as needed.
So thinking about this from a balance standpoint, I think that Hayate probably needs some balance adjustments, maybe more so than the other 2 ships that we talked about today. Keeping in mind the balance discussion that we had earlier, what would you change on Hayate, Arun, first?
Well, first I would give her the option to take F3s instead of what she has as well. I really don't see why that isn't an option. But I think a torpedo reload buff would be in order, slightly at least. Or maybe, I don't know, give her an option to switch to quad torpedoes. That will also include a torpedo reload buff. Even though quad torpedoes can feel terrible when the dispersion is bad, but they do reload faster. And how often does it matter to you that you launch 5 torpedoes instead of 4? I would say not that often, but being able to launch 40 seconds earlier is quite a big difference, which is the difference between Yugumo torpedo reload and Hayate torpedo reload. On the other hand, though, I suppose you can't have all the things in one ship, but maybe at tier 10, you could have an upgraded Yugumo like that.
Vanessa, how about you? Did you feel like there was something that needs adjustment on Hayate, or are you think it's okay the way it is?
I felt like the ship is pretty good. I don't know. I guess I just have a different feeling and opinion. Or I'm comfortable with the way that the torpedoes are. I mean, I've got the torpedo reload perk on my captain, and I took the torpedo reload mod 3, and I felt, comfortable with the cooldown and the reload time on those torpedoes, the way that I space them out, and the way I kind of deploy them. I was comfortable with that. I didn't really think like it was way too long of a reload, but if they are wanting to make this more of a hybrid torpedo and gunboat, then maybe that's something that they could buff. But I feel the ship is really well balanced right now from the games that I've had in it.
And last but not least, Zath, how do you feel about Hayate? Does it need an adjustment?
For right now, I'd say it's too early for me to make that determination. I've only played 1 game in her. The guns feel pretty darn solid, and one of the things I like about the ship is it encourages you to use the guns, and the Japanese destroyers have such great guns, but oftentimes we overlook those in favor of the torpedoes. The concealment is okay. It's not the greatest. Gets you down to 6.1, which, like you guys mentioned with the German destroyers, it's comparable. I think it's perfectly fine the way she is. She shouldn't be the best of everything, especially if she's looking to be more of like a hybrid. I'm thinking of her more like a Grozovoy, for example, something that can kind of do a little bit of everything, but not everything the greatest. But one thing I'm really looking forward to is seeing how anti-air works with her in carrier situations. But other than that, yeah, I don't think I would change too much. The torpedo maybe needs to be, a little bit of improvement in the reload there. But I don't know. For right now, I'd say, ask me again in 2 weeks.
Fair enough. Well, our last topic of the day is that we have new versions of several of the test ships that we talked about last week, specifically Siegfried, Colbert, and Ark Royal. Now, Arun, I think you had something you wanted to put in here about Ark Royal, but Zath wasn't with us last week, so I was hoping that he could give his just quick opinions about these ships and their new iterations.
Sure. So Ark Royal is... The thing about Ark Royal is when you drop torpedo bombers on somebody, and you break the rudder, you just smile every time, like it's just, hey, cool. I just Bismarcked that Arizona. So it feels good. But the torpedo bombers have been changed now. So there's a 9-wave attack instead of 6. That was really tough originally because I've been finding with this carrier more than any other, you don't have the speed to turn around and make a second strike as often. So, you really have to go into it thinking, I'm going to drop and then I'm going to take another plane. So pre-dropping is important and all that kind of stuff. It does murder destroyers, which is, meme worthy and that sort of thing. And I really want to take her into some of the operations. I'd love to take her into Raptor Rescue just to see what it's like. So that could be kind of fun. As far as the Siegfried, well, I was telling you, Kaloran, last night I had a 166K game in the Siegfried, which was incredible. Partially because 3 ships took it on themselves to take me out. We were talking about the super test ship syndrome before. And I managed to get 6 Citadels on a Yamato and just wipe it out. So that was a lot of fun. But beyond that, I haven't had too much success with the Siegfried. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Wargaming will do differently to her other than continuing Norfolk torpedo range. And Friesland, I only played a couple games. She was fun. No torpedoes feels weird. So, there's that. But she was okay. Am I missing any?
I believe we got Colbert again, actually.
Oh, yeah, Colbert again. That's a lot of fun, especially when a Montana looks at you and decides you don't deserve to exist. Yeah, I mean, she's all right. I decided to buff the range on her and just do max range pew-pew stuff, and it's been pretty successful. I think it's hilarious that you can go flat broadside to an enemy and get all of your guns on target, including the ones that are on the other side of the ship. So that's just kind of fun.
Aaron, what's your... you said you had something that you wanted to say about Ark Royal specifically.
So last time I talked about Ark Royal, I was kind of like, she's slow and whatnot. That's true, but she was actually quite fun even. I didn't quite realize just how amazing it feels to drop that many bombs into such a small area, because it looks kind of like rain when all the bombs drop. Now that was changed a little bit with the latest update, but her bombs did get better, I think, with the improved penetration. So even though you might have fewer, they're more likely to deal damage. And with the change to the torpedo bomber, so that you have 3 flights, that usually means you can at least do 2 full drops, or at least often. Ark Royal actually feels like what Tier 6 CV should be like, because I didn't feel really bored playing her like I often do with the other Tier 6 CVs. I think one of the reasons is that I didn't have to resort to the rocket planes as often, and because the rocket planes at Tier 6 tend to feel kind of mediocre because you just don't hit for all that much damage. And this is why Ark Royal felt quite fun, and I was really surprised by a Tier 6 CV being like that.
Vanessa, did you have any further thoughts on the test ships that we got new iterations of?
No, I haven't been able to get any matches because I've been focusing on the new ones, but I would want to put more games in Siegfried and hopefully have better results than what I've been getting.
Yeah, Siegfried is the ship that I want to like very badly, and I'm not sure that I'm there yet. Alrighty, well, Zath, we want to thank you for being on the show this week and sharing your insight into the ship balancing and stuff that you guys did in St. Petersburg. And I'm glad that we are able to get you on the show again before you have to start school up again.
Yeah, thanks. It's always a lot of fun being on here, and I'll tell you what, you guys do a great job. You've got so many listeners. It's hilarious when you come out with these podcasts and I'm playing a game like the day of or a couple of days after. Hey, Zath, I heard you on the podcast. Great job. It's so awesome to be able to see that the community is really engaged in this platform you guys have built. So keep it up.
Oh, we appreciate that. Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have anything to add before we close it out?
Yeah, I think if Wargaming nerfs Siegfried a few times more, maybe you'll like her then.
Maybe. Well, that's it for this week, folks. Don't forget we have a spot on the NA forums just for the Warships Podcast. Be sure to check that out for news and where to ask questions of the week. Now, we did have some questions of the week. We did not get to them this week. They're from INS Hunter 1948 and Hold My Beer from the forums. So we'll get to those next week, as well as any further questions that you guys might have as well. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. And we, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Backers are what make the podcast possible, and we could not make this without you guys. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.